I pulled out the brightest dress in my closet because today we have a very special colorful finish. Hi everyone, welcome to Edie's Craft Room. I'm Hannah Catherine Brand and my little quilting friend over here is Gumbo. He's going to join us for this one apparently. But today I'm so excited to share with you the final steps and completion of the Dragon Fruit Block of the Month quilt top. This was a Fat Quarter Shop exclusive, but I think it's really great to share these sorts of things because we all can learn different techniques from different shops that are putting out sew-alongs. And I don't know about you, but one of my favorite things to do is put on a video of someone else sewing while I'm doing the same. I'll keep this intro short and sweet because I know you want to get to the good stuff and see the quilting. Month 8 is the final piecing block of this block of the month. And so each of these blocks have come in this little packet with all of the fabric, as well as notating which blocks you are going to be making that month. So here is month 8. And then I do also have month 9, but all this is just the border and the binding. So I don't count this. This is our final blocks to make. Now, this is a Fat Quarter Shop exclusive, and when I originally purchased this pattern club, whatever you want to call it, I got this lovely book, and this has all of the patterns in it, so I have followed this throughout the last several months to help me make this quilt. So we are going to be making, as I said, month 8. So that is the fig block, the passion fruit block, the honeysuckle block, the apricot block, and the blueberry block. So another part of this whole situation here, this whole project, is the foundation paper. So this was my first exposure to foundation paper piecing, and as part of my overall payment for this kit, I got all of the papers. Ooh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bump you like that. And so these have been great as I've worked on the quilt. You have a lot of different sizes here. So with month 8, it looks like I am just in need of the 3x6 Flying Geese foundation paper pad. So I'll put that to the side. And then the 6-inch economy. And because when you pull out a bunch of paper, the binding will kind of separate. So this is in 2 pieces right now, but hasn't hurt the paper, so that's good. And then we also need square and a square paper. So that's going to be in that 6-inch pad that I just pulled out. And let's see, I think that's it. So I'll be able to save any leftovers I have for another project. Again, this was my introduction to foundation paper piecing, and I ended up really loving it. You probably saw how much I loved it because I just completed a quilt. It was the Scrappy Americana quilt by Lori Holt. I will link that video up above for you to check that out in case you missed it. But that was had at least an option to do foundation paper piecing, and I took that option and really enjoyed it. So I also just have my bin here of all of my blocks that I've already created. I won't go through all of these individually right now, because hopefully very soon we're going to get to the point where we get to lay everything out and finish this quilt together. If you've been around my channel for pretty much any amount of time, you will know that I really love working with these smaller pieces of fabric. I just don't really have the space to manage huge pieces of fabric in terms of for ironing or cutting. And so being able to just work on a quilt in these bite-sized pieces is quite satisfying for me. Also, I have to show you something I'm really excited about. I got this little tabletop trash can just from Target, actually. I think it was like $6, but it has been so great to use for just those like little crumb pieces that just pile up on your table and get in the way, and you don't really feel like pulling out the whole trash can or scooping everything. It's just like an easy thing to drop little scraps in. I think it's great for any crafter, and I actually got it for a crafty friend of mine as well. She's really into crochet, so I can just imagine all of the little bits of yarn that she has laying around when she's working on a project. I think she also does needlepoint as well. So anyway, just a fun little treat yourself moment. And I felt bad because when I got it for her, I didn't want her to, I told her, you know, I thought of you when I saw this, and I would have hated for her to think that I saw a trash can and thought of her, but it was truly just a gift from one crafter to another. But I have really loved mine, and sometimes it's just those little things that are fun to add to your space. So as with any quilty project, I am just pressing my fabric. I have my wool pressing mat underneath, and that is just an amazing addition to my craft room. Talk about fun little notions. Although that one was a little bigger of a notion than that little $6 trash can, but it has been well worth it. And just given all of this a great press. Quick little update too for those of you who have been around since my Aliso iron saga. I'm still loving my $12 Black & Decker replacement iron, and I think I'm probably just gonna continue with that type of iron for probably the rest of my quilting journey, unless one day maybe I would really, really like to try out one of those Laura Star irons. I just cannot justify the price at this point in time in my life, as well as just don't really have the space for the full setup. And I feel like if you're gonna commit to it, you gotta really commit to the full system. So maybe one day, but not today. I'm loving the $15 Black & Decker iron. Also, I get a lot of questions about this, and I know other quilters do too. I do not starch my fabric. When I first started quilting, and I will say I did it the wrong way. So I didn't have great results. I'm sure if I did it the right way, it would be amazing. I know people who do it love it, especially when they just get their technique down. I've heard it really helps with increasing your accuracy as you're sewing and piecing things together. I just, for whatever reason, it hasn't appealed to me. And so again, maybe that's something I'll change at some point in time in the future, but right now it's just an extra step that I'm not really all that interested in taking. So let me know if I should change my mind on that, but right now that's kind of where I'm at. I also don't even steam. I truly just use a hot iron, and that has been getting me the results I love. I'm fairly certain Lori Holt does it the same way. She's very much just like hot iron, and I'm done. I think she uses a vintage iron though, which I imagine is probably, you know, maybe arguably even better than my $15 Black & Decker. But yeah, I think just a matter of preference and getting the results that you want. But you certainly could, with at least with the Fat Quarter Shop kits and blocks of the month. They're generally very generous with fabric that they give you. There is a ton of fabric left over from this block of the month. So you absolutely could starch if you want to. And also I found with the foundation paper piecing, it's pretty forgiving with your piecing. So, you know, in terms of the accuracy part of it, the paper is what helps you out with the accuracy. So, so that's also just another reason with at least my last two quilts, this one and then the American flag one, I haven't felt the need to wade into that territory yet. But I will say, sneak peek, for my next quilt, I am really going to focus in on a laundry basket quilt, and I have actually already done a video on my first attempt working with it. I will post that link above. It is definitely an advanced quilt, and you have to be very particular with everything to get it all to line up. So maybe that's one that I probably should have starched everything before I got started, but I don't know, we'll learn as we go along. That's kind of the way I tend to do things on this channel, is trial and error, which is all part of the learning process, right? So anyway, we are about done here. I'm just gonna give everything a final smoothing and then we will get into cutting. I have a fresh blade on my rotary cutter, and actually I just disposed of one of those endurance blades. My brother kindly got me an endurance blade for Christmas, and he just got me a pack of one because they're kind of pricey. He got me other things too, but I loved that blade. If you have not tried them, they are completely worth the money. I would say I probably completed 3 projects with that one blade, which is a lot. Now, toward the end of it, I probably could have replaced it, so I definitely pushed it. But yeah, I loved it. I'm back to just the normal blades right now because I had some in my stash, and I can already tell the difference. So yeah, I definitely will be adding some more of those to my Christmas list this year because it ended up being a great investment. He also actually, I'm reaching for something else he got me one of those sets of the square rulers from Creative Grids, and I have been loving those, especially for this project where there's lots of different squares. So thank you, Zach. Your gift has been very well used. So here's our first piece of fabric. We need 4 5¼ inch squares. So this is a 5½ inch ruler, and so I am going to just line everything up. I have my, let's see, got my straight edge there. I'm going to do one more straight edge there, and I just have this piece of fabric just folded up to get everything in one cut. Whoops. It's not the blade, I promise. I'm just sitting a little far back for the camera. And then look, here we go. Boop. You probably couldn't see that, but using my little tabletop trash can. Okay, so now we have our square. So let's see. Flip this around like this. So there's 5 inches, and then there's 5¼ Great. So for these smaller pieces, I like using my rotating cutting mat. That is my preference. And then I put it on top of my regular cutting mat because when I get to the larger pieces to cut, I will need that. There we go. Our first cut. So not going to bore you with the cutting part. Pretty self-explanatory. If you've spent even a little bit of time quilting, you know how this goes. So enjoy the magic of editing, and I'll speed the rest up. I have all of my pieces cut out now. It took me probably about 30 minutes to cut everything out, so not too bad at all. And now I am on to the piecing part. So we are going to be making 3 different types of foundation paper piece blocks. We'll do the flying geese, the economy, and then a square and a square. So I'm just going to show you one of each. In this block of the month kit, you're actually doing a few of each, but just for time's sake, I'm just going to do one of each so you can kind of get a sense of how the paper piecing works for each of these styles of blocks. Although all of these pieces, I'm going to just go ahead and call them units because they're going to make up a bigger block that's then going to go into the quilt, which you'll see in just a minute. So first, let's start off with, let's do the easy one first. These square and a squares are a lot of fun, which I don't know about you, but square and a square is one that can be a little bit tricky for me. So having the foundation paper is really nice for this type of block. So I just pulled out how many I'm going to need to satisfy all of the units in this block. So we'll just take one, and actually I'm going to be flipping in my pattern just to make sure I have my color placement correct. All right, so we're going to take this orange fabric here, and then this is just going to go in one, and the pattern tells you the placement of everything. There's also great visuals, so that will be helpful as well. Now, if you have a light box, that would be fantastic. I have one on my Christmas list for this year. However, I have excellent natural light in my craft room, So you can even just see it on camera here. If I hold it up to the light, I can kind of get a sense of where my lines are. So, so with that said, I'm just gonna take my fabric 1 and then put it so it's about even. Now it doesn't have to be perfect, but I generally want to ensure that I have at least a 1/4 inch on each side of these lines here. So again, not perfect, and thank goodness it doesn't have to be, but that feels about right. Now, update for you all who have been watching me foundation paper piece. Since the beginning, I have been using pins because that's what I have. And the pens have been working fine, don't get me wrong. But I did go ahead and pull my Sue Daily glue stick from my English paper piecing kit, which I know I owe you all an updated video on my Insanity quilt at some point, sooner rather than later. Part of the reason for that is I have not made as much progress as I had hoped for, but that's a whole other can of worms. For this project, I have started to use this in the last couple of blocks, and I actually do really like it. So generally I'm trying to put the glue down where my seam allowance is, but for pieces of fabric like this, where you're going to be trimming on all sides and it's the center piece of fabric, I just go ahead and put it in the middle. So that has been lovely, to be honest. It's been faster and honestly more accurate, because the pins, even the flathead ones, they do cause just a little extra bulk when it's running through your sewing machine. So anyway, you all converted me. Thank you. I do like this method. All right, so next part is the folding. Some people will do this, you know, before they mess with their fabric. I just do it after. So I just take my nail and go to my next step. So we did step 1, right? So then we're going to step 2 and just folding. I try and just make sure. Some people will use a ruler. I've just found I can do it about like this and get still an excellent result. I did have acrylic nails on a couple weeks ago because I was taking some photos and had that sort of manicure on. And I loved having that pointy acrylic nail. It just made this folding process so easy. So now that I have my fabric there, now it is time to trim. So I just use one of my existing rulers. They make smaller rulers for foundation paper piecing. I just use the 1/4 inch mark on one of my rulers. That works just fine. And then I am trimming a 1/4 inch seam allowance on steps 2 and 3. So now I have this ready to add some fabric to it. So it looks like we're going to be adding some of our polka dots in placement 2. Let's see, actually we're going to be doing a polka dot in 2, or a large polka dot in 2 and a smaller polka dot in 3, and these are the 5 inch, so our bigger piece. So we'll need one of these, and then we need one of these. Okay, so I'm just flipping it over. That's 3. So I can do, the great thing about this block is you can kind of do 2 steps at a time. So I can do that right there. And as I said before, if I can, I'm going to be putting my glue right in the seam allowance and then just sticking that there. And then here is 2 and putting that there. So then I would take this to my machine and I'm just stitching on line 2 and line 3. Now, if you've never done this before, you do want to use a really small stitch width on, or stitch length on your foundation paper piecing. It just helps take the paper off easier. And I think also just helps kind of reinforce your seams, especially if you're pressing open. So anyway, just a friendly reminder there. It does take a little bit longer, but I do think it's worth it. So now I will just be pressing according to the pattern, and you can use, of course, your iron. I find that when I'm doing this, I just move better using one of these seam rollers. This is from Clover. There are plenty others out there. I really like this on just a nice hard surface, and it keeps my rhythm going, I feel, instead of having to, you know, pick up my iron and get my pressing mat out and all of that. This just helps me with my flow state. So we'll just press all of that. And then, guys, we're almost done. This is so exciting. So then we'll flip it over and we have step 4 and 5 left. So I am just going to tear back the paper to make room for that seam allowance just until I'm at my line. And I'm going to fold, and sometimes this will happen here. That's all right, just fold it, because this is the guide to trim your 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then we will now make those cuts again. And I find that these are pretty easy to do in bulk. So not necessarily chain piecing, but just doing a bunch at a time. That's kind of how I do it, especially when you're making a bunch of the same type, but just swapping in and out fabrics. You definitely have to be careful and pay attention. You can't go in autopilot mode when you're doing that, but especially if, you know, your quilt isn't Scrappy and it doesn't matter where things are placed, but it's a pretty efficient process. So that leaves us with our square and a square ready to have some more pieces added to it. So it looks like from our pattern, we are just adding 2 more of these big polka dots here. Oops, lost our paper. So I'm taking my glue stick right on the seam allowance there. And then we'll do it for the other side. So for example, the log cabin blocks, those take so much longer because you can't do 2 steps at once. You have to truly go step by step by step. But for like a courthouse step block or something like this where you can trim and add more fabric and sew everything, so step 1 and step 2 together, that just helps you breeze through these types of units. So we'll take this to the sewing machine and then I will meet you back here to trim it down. I know this looks horrifying, but trust the process. I took this to my pressing mat and just gave it a nice hot press to keep everything just extra flat. So now I'm turning it over to trim down. I have, let's see, this is not the right ruler. I think I have the right size. I do. So this is my 6.5 inch square ruler. You don't need this. You could just line up your different size ruler on the lines that the pattern directs you to trim on. But since I have this, I'm gonna use it. And I'm just gonna line my ruler up with those lines. This works great on a rotating cutting mat, but for demonstration purposes, we're just gonna keep it on the regular mat. And these are so grippy, so it's helpful if you don't have one. We are just trimming this up and it's gonna be beautiful. You're gonna be so impressed. And there's our block. So I will need to make 3 more of these off camera to finish all of the units needed for this final stage, but that is how you make the square and a square block. I won't spend as much time on the economy block because it's essentially a square and a square just with an extra step. So, you know, once you've mastered the first one, this one is going to be a breeze. It just might take a little bit longer. But I will go ahead and just pull out my fabrics. Fabric 1 is going to be our small polka dot, and then we are going to be surrounding that with this lilac color triangles. And then it looks like we will also have another peak of this teal larger polka dot there. Now this one came out a little bit wonky. Sometimes it'll shift a bit under the sewing machine, but that again is just the beauty of how this foundation paper makes everything look perfectly. So even though it's doing that, I'm not worried about it because I know it'll all work out in the end. So then we're just repeating that step and setting the lines for our seam allowance and adding all of those triangles around. So again, because we went in depth on the square and a square block, I'm not going to spend too much time here. Otherwise, this video would get even longer than it already is. So I am going to finish the rest of this block off camera, and you are going to get to enjoy the final product sooner than I will. I'll see you in a bit. And there we have our completed economy block, which is so exciting. So we'll just have to take the paper off at a later time. I like to save up all of my paper backings and take them off while I'm watching TV in the evening with my husband. It's just something nice I can do with my hands to stay busy, but also pay attention. So that will be going in my pile to peel paper off of. And then last but not least, we will be working on the flying geese blocks. So these I found when I first started making them are a little bit less intuitive than some of the other ones, mainly because you're making, you know, 2 at a time, which I think can be somewhat confusing just because that's not how traditional flying geese are made. So you actually, believe it or not, those big squares that you cut are going to be used for a very large piece, this one position, which actually is going to look something like this. It'll be lined up kind of like that. So anyway, just a little bit different. I will say that if you're someone who really tries to be careful with your fabric and you don't like any waste, this method is certainly not good for that. You do get quite a bit of waste doing this method. So buyer beware just for that. But for everyone else who saves our crumbs, or you know what, just accepts that there's collateral with different techniques, then this is how you know you do it. So we will again put this one, I'm going to center it up, flip it over, hold it up to the light. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to put a little bit more glue than I usually would, just because it's such a big piece. All right, and then it's really the same process from there on out. You are just peeling down your lines, your seam allowance lines in order. So we'll look at 2 first, and that actually got in the way of my glue, so I will glue in a different spot next time. And then I, with these, can do 2 steps at a time, which is nice, helps make everything go faster. All right, my glue placement was not ideal. It's obvious that it's been a minute since I've made the flying geese foundation paper. I reglued, so that's much more secure than it was last time, and hopefully will not get in the way of any of my creases. And then it's, again, just the same process as we've done before for all of these other blocks, where we are folding on the lines, trimming our seam allowance, adding our fabric right sides together, stitching down those lines, and then pressing, and then just continuing that process. So I am going to finish this one up, and then I will meet you back here when it's time to trim it down, just because it's a little bit different than our other blocks where we've just been able to trim them as squares. All right, we have all of our fabric together, and now it's time to trim this block down. So the appearance of it is that it's just another square in a square block, but it is not. So we're gonna turn it over. And this is one where I'm just gonna use one of my rectangular rulers and follow the cutting instructions. So I am lining it up where the paper instructs me to. It says trim on this line, and I am going to trim down. So just trimming down all of my outer edges first, and then we will almost split the remaining rectangle in half. Oops, sorry. All right, so then we have these two lines here, and this is going to be what separates those two flying geese that we made in one piece of paper. Are you ready for the big reveal? There we go. We have two beautiful flying geese. I'm thrilled with where we're at in the process, because in doing all of those blocks with you, in addition to making a couple different variations of the flying geese blocks, we are in a position to put together the sherbet block that is mentioned in the pattern, and this will be our final block before we can put all of the blocks together to finish the quilt. So very exciting times. So I am going to set these aside and lay everything out just so you can see how it's gonna look, and make sure I have all of my pieces lined up the correct way, because they all kind of look similar, but there are some variations there. So let's see, I think that's correct. And then we have one of those there. And then we will flip this guy on its side. And yep, we're doing two of those. Okay, so the way the pattern has all of this coming together, it looks like we're doing it in columns. So we'll stitch these together, and then these two together, and then this together, and then the columns together. And it does advise to press open, which is another great reason to use that small seam. So let's get that done. And there is our beautiful final block. So now I just need to make 3 more of these, and I will meet you actually on the floor, because once I'm done with that, it will be time to lay this quilt out. My blocks are all done, and I went ahead and sewed them into individual rows, and then I will sew my rows into different squares. So there are actually 4 layers here. It's a little bit hard to see, or you really can't see it, but 4 layers here. And I am going to be making 4 of the large units that you see here. And then those 4 units will go together, they'll be rotated, and that's really the quilt plus some borders. So I'm gonna get to sewing. This should be just easy, soothing sewing at this point, and then we'll lay everything out to get our final result. This has to be one of my favorite quilts I have ever made. I am so excited by it. And you know, it's interesting because I think my interior decor taste is very different than what I just generally like in either clothes or other areas. So if you had told me that this colorful rainbow, almost fluorescent in some of the colors quilt would be such a favorite, I don't know if I would have believed you a few years ago. But this one has just brought me so much joy. Truly, from the first block to the last block, I was enjoying myself. I loved the paper piecing aspect of it and getting to see all of those little tiny pieces come together in such a beautiful quilt and unique quilt is just completely satisfying. As for my quilting plans, I intend to do something very similar to how the sample quilt in the sample photos was quilted. I love the swirliness of that quilting, and so I plan to select something very similar from my quilter, which is Sundance Quilter. That's where I send all of my quilts out to Draper, Utah. And then for my backing, I'm particularly excited because I did splurge on one of the Tula Pink cuddles that actually matches the background fabric in this quilt. I had originally said I was going to stay away from it because I didn't buy the original backing set, which is very similar. Some of you who have been watching me for a while may remember that I have a phobia of birds, and so I try and stay away from quilting patterns or fabric that has birds in it because that does not bring me joy. But I just couldn't find anything that I liked better, and I thought it would complement so well. And the cuddle is definitely going to be a fantastic addition to this quilt because who doesn't love a soft quilt to curl up in? I plan on using this one a lot, especially when I need an extra pep in my step on some rainy days. Now I think I've started a trend because on my last foundation paper piecing quilt top finish, I gave away my remaining scraps, and let me tell you, it felt so good, and I know so many of you enjoyed the opportunity to participate in that, and I want to do that again for this quilt. I just don't have a ton of space, and I find that scraps are not my strong suit for working with. I would love to one day really get into making scrappy quilts, but just in the meantime, I don't have the space for it. And I find that when I'm done working with a fabric, I want to work with a new fabric. So that said, I would love to give away my remaining scraps. Fat Quarter Shop is always incredibly generous with their kits in the fabric that they provide you. So I've got a ton. I will say I am going to keep just a very small quantity. I hope that's okay. I have another small project planned with those small scraps, but you will be receiving the vast majority of them. All you have to do to enter is leave me a comment on this video and let me know what you would use these scraps for. I'll leave this giveaway open until September 8th, which is 2 weeks from when this video premieres, to give everyone a chance to enter. And the way that you will know that you won is I will create a post on the community tab here on my channel. It should be popping up in your feed if you are subscribed to the channel. From there, I'll just have you send me an email, and that way we can do a secure exchange of address and no one gets caught up in any scams. As always, thank you so much for watching and spending some of your valuable time with me here in my craft room. And until next time, happy quilting. Bye-bye.